Hello. I want to touch on an issue that I've been having, or I just now solved, but it's been an ongoing issue for about 3.5 to 4 years. Using the XR-18 as a audio interface and of course a mixer with the XR software on a PC with the X-Touch. I've been having issues in the past. And I got to show you a couple of things before I move on with this conversation. I use these X keys for some of my controls, special transport controls, setting markers, going to those markers, whatever. Everything is programmed in here. These are used for shortcuts for just about everything else when it comes to audio or MIDI editing. So I have them integrated into the whole system. These, however, used to be plugged into the back of the X-Touch using the USB hub that it comes with. Well, aside from that, I'm going to try to do this as quickly and as efficiently as I can. I was using a router in my system. The reason why is I live on a farm. The farm's network is huge. I really didn't want to have my X-Touch and XR-18 and computer just kind of being thrown on a network with 100 and something nodes on it already. Never mind the fact that it does have dropouts periodically, and the dropouts would cause a disconnect on the system, the X-Touch to the XR-18. So to isolate it, this was before I realized what was causing the problem. But to isolate it for the last 2 or 3 years, I use a simple router. I put the router in DHCP mode, which means that it supplies IPs to anything plugged into a LAN port, local IPs, and I did not use the WAN port. I just used the LAN inputs. So plugged in the computer, plugged in the X-Touch, plugged in the XR-18. But like I said, I was having issues where I couldn't get the damn thing to link up. Like in the morning, I would turn the system on, and I have individual switches for most of the equipment here for that reason, so I could control what gets turned on in what order. You see, I got different switches for everything. So the X-Touch would get turned on after the XR-18 and the rest of the rack. XR-18 is down here, along with a bunch of other equipment, including the reference amplifier. So what I would do is I would turn everything on, then I would turn this on last, and then hit scan. For the last 3 or 4 years, almost every time I would turn the X-Touch on, I never could get the scan to link up with anything. It wouldn't do it. Then if I shut the power off, turn it back on, and hit scan, most of the time it would do it on the first try. If it didn't do it on the first try, it wouldn't do it at all. It was driving me nuts. And I was talking to Sweetwater, because I bought it from Sweetwater, and they still have tech support available. So I was talking to them about the problem. They never really helped me with it. They had no clue. I explained to them the network situation, the whole thing, and what I did. They really didn't help. Well, about 3 days after I had that conversation with them, which was 4 months ago or so, I had noticed that when I unplugged the X keys controls from the back USB ports in the back, which is the USB hub built into the X-Touch, the problem went away. But I still really didn't like the way it was set up. And the problem is by the time I found out that unplugging the X keys was the real problem, I had taken out this router. And I connected it directly to the farm system to see if I did it like everybody else, would it actually make a difference? So I got rid of this, put this aside. I put an Ethernet switch in here instead, and I connected it the way somebody might connect it at your home network. So now it shows up on the routers for the farm. Like the X-Touch shows up separately, the XR-18 shows up, the computer shows up. I really didn't want that. We're talking about a studio setup. All I wanted to do is physically wire one device to another, and I got to go through a whole network. This is a square mile, this property. So the router is quite literally almost a half a mile away from here. I really didn't want that. And the truth is after I connected it, it didn't solve the problem anyway. I left it like that anyway, just for now. I gave Sweetwater another call 2 days ago, and I talked to them about it. I explained the situation as thoroughly as I could, kind of the way I just did now with you, explaining the steps that I have taken over the last couple of years. I think what happened is I was telling this guy so much information, his brain just checked out because he didn't seem to pay attention to anything I said, because I could tell because some of the things he brought up later, I already told him I wasn't doing that. He was talking about Wi-Fi connectivity, my iPad. Don't have an iPad, don't use Wi-Fi for any of this. I don't know what the hell he was doing or where his brain was, but it certainly wasn't with our conversation. So at the end, he did make a discovery. He made a discovery that he told me, and it made sense to me. And here's the one thing I forgot to tell you, is I learned that somebody was being able to connect the XR-18 directly to the X-Touch. And there's documentation that supports that from Behringer. But they failed to mention a very important thing, and this is what the guy at Sweetwater said. He said, but how are you interfacing into it? I'm saying I connect the X-Touch directly to the XR-18. He goes, yeah, but how are you using the software? I'm like, oh, good point. He goes, the computer's not connected to anything, right? It's just connected directly to one another, the X-Touch to the XR-18. Yeah, it is. Well, there's a problem. There's no communication to the computer. I said, yeah, of course. All right. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, cool. I gotcha. So I let it go at that and said, okay, I'll fix that. He said, but you're still going to need a router. I'm like, why do I need a router? He goes, because you need to be able to connect all these things. I said, yeah, but a switch would do the same thing. Yeah, but a switch doesn't route things. I said, no, it doesn't. But the what is it? The XR Air Edit software has a DHCP setting in it. So that means that it acts as a DHCP server passing out IPs. And he's adamant about the router. I'm like, whatever. I let him go. I was just kind of disgusted. And immediately I started working on it when I got off the phone with him. Within 20 minutes, I had the whole thing working exactly the way I hoped, without going through the network of the farm, and by utilizing a simple Ethernet switch and having it set up correctly. And I'm about to show you what that is. Now, keep in mind that the only difference between the XR-18's DHCP server and a router is that a router is also an internet gateway, whereas the DHCP server on the XR-18 is not doing nothing more than providing local IPs for the nodes or the devices that are plugged into it. So you're probably thinking, well, how the hell are you getting on the internet? Yeah, I'm going to get to that right now. So I'm going to show you the setup. Okay, first of all, in the XR-18 setup, go into the LAN settings, and you will see that there is a DHCP server setting. I turn this on. When I turn this on, I get these as the defaults. Really doesn't really matter. Just put it on DHCP server, hit apply, and then go into the XR or the X-Touch. Now this is the weird part. Okay, so in my setup, I use my X-Touch for both control over the XR software, which is the XR-18, but I also use it for the DAW software, which in this particular case is either Cubase or Ardour. I have no intention on continuing to use Windows for any of my studio stuff. I'm about done with Microsoft's BS. So I've set up a complete Linux system specifically designed for audio, and I will be using Ardour 9 in Linux. Anyway, so I use this for both DAW control, and I also use it for XR-18 control. And to select between the two, I simply use the SMPTE button here. or the beats button, whatever you want to call it. It's labeled as both. Okay, so important here, I'm going to show you the settings. So to use it for both uses, XR-18 control and DAW, it's set up for X control and MC. MC is Mackie control. All right, so that will give you the both control. It's set up for network, which is probably the best way to control it rather than MIDI, unless you're having MIDI control coming out of the back of here, going to the devices, into the input of the MIDI of the XR-18. But we're talking about network connectivity here, or Ethernet, I should say. So it's on network. The next one over, this is the part that is this, something's not right, but this works this way. I want to point out that when you have a DHCP server set up such as this mode should not be on slave IP. It should be on DHCP. And you have, see, the DHCP is set to on, or it's in that mode and it's set to on. It doesn't work in that mode for some reason, which is really strange because it should, but whatever. So I put it into the slave IP mode and I manually set the IP up. Now, I want to make this very clear that when the XR software is acting as the DHCP server, it defaults at its IP of 192.168.1.1. So meaning that it's on subnet number 1. That's the third digit in the 4-digit IP address. So the 192.168.1, that's the 1 in this case is the subnet, okay? So when you do that, it sets it up on as a default IP of 192.168.1.1. And it starts providing IPs using the DHCP server to your other nodes starting at 192.168.1.101. So from 101 all the way up, that's the IP it's going to pick, one of those IPs for all the nodes in your system, including the computer. So I just simply set this to 104 because obviously it's in the range that it would be assigning an IP. So this is basically suggesting what IP the DHCP server gives it. And since it is suggesting 104, the DHCP server will allow that to happen. Now on the computer side, different story. On the computer side, I'm going to point this out. I have 2 network cards. I've always had 2 network cards, even when I was using the router, for the purpose of separating the stuff, because I really don't want this to work and show up on the network here at the farm. And I suggest everybody does this because most motherboards on most computers nowadays are coming with dual RJ45 Ethernet inputs anyway. Okay, so the card that runs the XR-18, I'm going to go into the settings. Real simple setup. In fact, it's not even setup. It's basically the default. So if I go into the version 4, TCP/IP version 4, again, this is Windows. It's simply set up to obtain the IP address automatically. And the reason why that can be on that is because the DHCP server of the XR-18 is providing whatever IP it has available to give to this network card. Okay, so the computer ends up on 102. Just so happens. I didn't put it on 102, but the DHCP server assigned it to 102. You'll see that there's a second NIC card. This NIC card is the one connected directly to the farm. You can also see that it's on obtain IP address automatically because the router in the main office is providing IPs, so this takes whatever the router in the office gives me. Now you can tell if you go into the XR-18 software under connection, you can see down here this computer, the 192.168.1.102 is the X-Touch. I'm sorry, is the IP that the XR-18 gave the computer. this one on the bottom, the 168.5 subnet of 5.22, is the one given by the router here at the farm. So they're on two different subnets, and that's why this works. So if you wanted to do exactly what I'm doing, your home router, you just simply change the home router so it has a different subnet other than one. The reason why I say that is because I learned that according to the documentation, if you use the XR software with the XR-18 in DHCP mode, which of course we are, right? I'm sorry, DHCP server mode, where it's serving the IPs, you can't change the subnet. It's going to be 1, meaning 1. Okay? So you would have to change your home network router, simply change the subnet to something other than 1, probably 2, and then all the nodes and all the computers and the devices on your home network would simply all change over to that subnet automatically, because your router would be providing the IPs for everything. So in the back of the computer, I simply have two different network cards. I got the default one that's built onto the motherboard, and most motherboards nowadays will have two of these, but I only have one on this particular board. And I put a second one in down here. So the original motherboard one gets plugged directly into the farm's network, right there. The XR-18 dedicated network card is plugged into the switch. Now, you can see that the computer, as I just showed you, it's a black cord. It goes up and plugs into one of the LAN ports of the switch, okay? The X-Touch uses a yellow cable. You can see it right there. That's plugged into one of the other LAN ports. The blue cable is the XR-18, as you can see right there. The XR-18 is the DHCP server. So on my particular switch, this is a commercial switch, it has an uplink port on it. Most switches, most consumer grade switches don't have an uplink port. So that means that you can plug the XR-18 into any one of these ports. On this particular one, I have to plug it in to the uplink port because that is the DHCP server providing IPs to everything else. So that's why the XR-18 is plugged directly into this port. Anything else that you plug in over here is going to be given an IP from the XR-18. So that's why it's set up this way. What this means now is that because the network of the farm is on a totally different subnet than the XR-18 is using, it means there's no conflict between the two network cards. And since most motherboards come with two network inputs anyway, you can configure them totally separate. And basically what this means is the controls for the X-Touch and the XR-18 and the computer's control with the XR software have nothing at all to do with the actual network that I get my internet from. That's a big deal. And I can still browse the network of the farm and print on printers that are available on the network that aren't even close to here and do all that other stuff. So you would be able to do that at your house too, on your personal home network. So I hope this helps somebody, because this drove me nuts, and I really did not want to have my music gear tied in with Wi-Fi and rely on connectivity outside of just the studio stuff. I really don't like that idea. I especially don't like the idea when it comes to being on the farm system, which has absolutely nothing to do with my studio setup. I don't want my stuff showing up on any of their stuff. So I just wanted to point that out in case, even if you're in an apartment complex that maybe shares a single router, or if you just want to isolate your stuff on your home studio using this stuff, or if you want to set it up in a live venue and you don't want to have the control between the PC, the XR-18 and the X Touch on the house system, which I would definitely not do. So anyway, I think this is the best solution. I prefer to not use Wi-Fi when I can. And I understand that Behringer now had a new hardware update. This is mine's the original version, but I guess they were having major issues with the access point, the wireless access point in the XR-18, which I've never used. But they said when it comes to personal home networks, it works fine. But if you bring it to a live environment and you got the house system with the Wi-Fi, all the people with Wi-Fi enabled on their phones, it just completely craps out in the middle of its operation. So I prefer to use everything in wired. Is simplified. It doesn't sound simple, but once you set it up, the way it functions is way simpler, and it's self-reliant. It's not relying on home networks and other routers. In fact, it's not using a router at all. So that's what's great. As long as you set up the XR software in DHCP mode and you set everything up the way I mentioned it, that I recommended it, that I set it up, I think you'd be good. So I hope this helps somebody. Thanks.